I didn't want this job, not really. But when you're drowning in bills and your record isn't spotless, you take whatever's offered. And what I got was night janitor at an abandoned mall in North Texas. A place that used to be packed with families and food courts and screaming kids, now just a husk. Silent and hollow except for the wind seeping in through the cracked skylights. The guy who hired me, Mr. Kessler, barely looked me in the eye when he handed me the keys and the work schedule. He just said, "Do your rounds, keep the floors clean, and don't go poking around where you don't need to," which sounded like a warning, but I was too desperate to care. The first night I clocked in at 11 p.m., dragging my mop bucket across the cracked tiles. The whole place smelled of old smoke and dust, the kind that sticks in your throat. The food court was empty except for broken chairs, graffiti on the walls, and an echo that followed me with every step. I remember thinking it was just another dead mall like hundreds across the country. Nothing scary about it, just depressing, until I heard the escalator hum. At first I thought I imagined it because the mall had no power. The generators only lit the maintenance hallways and emergency lights. Everything else was supposed to be dead, but there it was. The steady clattering hum of moving steps, grinding metal echoing down the corridor. I pushed my mop aside and followed the sound, my chest tightening with every step. And when I turned the corner, I froze. The escalator to the second floor was moving, its rubber handrails sliding, the steps clanking as if hundreds of invisible feet were climbing. I stood there with my mouth open, the dim emergency light barely reaching the top landing. And that's when I saw it, a figure, blurry at first, like someone standing still, only a silhouette. Tall and narrow, not moving but facing straight down at me. I wanted to call out, but something in my gut told me not to. Instead, I gripped the mop handle like a weapon and waited. My pulse slamming in my ears, the escalator rattled on. The figure didn't budge, and after a few seconds of me staring and trying to make sense of what I was looking at, the sound stopped, just cut off mid-grind. The escalator froze, and when I blinked, the figure was gone. Like it had been erased, I walked closer, every step heavy, the smell of burnt plastic hanging in the air. I touched the metal rail and it was warm, like the machine had really been running. Not some trick of my imagination, I remember whispering to myself, "What the hell is this place?" Then the overhead speaker crackled just once, a sharp pop of static. Even though the PA system hadn't worked in decades, I backed away, my skin crawling, and told myself it had to be some leftover wiring glitch. But deep down I knew glitches don't leave silhouettes staring at you. Later, when I found the old logbook in the guard office, the one with the rules written inside, I realized the escalator wasn't just a machine, it was a warning. And that first night was only the beginning of understanding how wrong this mall really was. After that first night with the escalator, I told myself I was just tired. Maybe the brain plays tricks when you're stuck in a dead mall at midnight with nothing but the buzz of fluorescent lights and your own breathing. But I couldn't shake the way that figure stared at me, or how the escalator rail was warm like someone had really been riding it. I didn't sleep well the next day, tossed on my mattress in the small apartment the company set me up with. And by the time the second night came around, I was on edge, telling myself I'd bring coffee and music in my headphones just to keep sane. When I got to the mall, Mr. Kessler was waiting by the employee entrance smoking a cigarette. He squinted at me through the smoke and asked, "You hear anything last night?" His tone made it sound like he already knew. I hesitated, then shrugged. The escalator moved. His face twitched. Not surprise exactly, more like irritation, he muttered. "You'll need the book." Then he led me to the old security office on the second floor. The room stank of mold and stale smoke. Filing cabinets rusted. Old CRT monitors stacked in the corner with spider webs clinging to their screens. Kessler rummaged in a drawer until he pulled out a battered leather logbook, its edges frayed, pages yellowed. He tossed it on the desk and said, "Read it during your shift. Keep it close, don't ask me questions you don't want answers to." Then he stubbed out his cigarette on the desk and walked away, leaving me staring at the book like it was a bomb. I sat down, flipped it open, and saw handwriting that had shifted over decades. Different pens, different people, some neat, some messy, but always the same thing copied over and over like scripture. Rules, 7 of them, each underlined in red ink. I remember copying them into my phone just in case. They went like this. Rule 1. Don't use the elevators after midnight. Rule 2. If the PA system comes on, lower your head and don't look up. Rule 3. In the food court, never pick up food left behind even if it looks fresh. Rule 4. If the Santa's workshop store lights up, shut your eyes until it's dark again. Rule 5. If you hear someone calling your name from the basement, do not answer. Rule 6. If you see yourself on the security cameras, turn off the monitor immediately. Rule 7. Never leave the mall before 5 a.m. no matter what happens. My throat went dry reading them. Some sounded ridiculous. Others felt too specific to be a joke. I flipped through the back pages and found entries, notes from janitors before me, short warnings like Ed looked at the PA speakers, he didn't come back, or Maria picked up the fries in the food court. She vomited black for 2 days before disappearing. Every page carried the weight of people who had worked this place and vanished. I felt my skin prickle because I had almost broken Rule 2 already. When the PA crackled last night, I looked straight at the ceiling. I didn't see anything more than a silhouette, but what if that was already too close? What if that was the reason my stomach had been unsettled all day? I carried the logbook with me as I started my rounds, the mop bucket squeaking against the floor, shadows stretching across the empty corridors. I checked the shuttered storefronts, most burned or stripped. Mannequins with melted faces staring blankly from display windows. When I reached the food court, I froze, because on one of the tables sat a paper tray with a burger and fries, fresh steam rising, the ketchup packet torn neatly. The smell sharp and greasy in the air. I remembered Rule 3. My stomach growled, but my hand stayed at my side. I whispered, not touching it, and forced myself to walk past. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me, faint at first, then louder. I spun around, but the food court was empty except for the tray. The fries now half-eaten, ketchup smeared on the table like someone had been sitting there seconds ago. I nearly bolted, but forced myself to breathe, clutched the logbook tighter, telling myself this was why the rules existed, not as jokes, not as superstition, but because things here played games. They wanted you to slip. They wanted you to doubt. I tried calling Sandra on the radio. She was the overnight security guard who sometimes walked the mall with me. Her voice crackled through. Stay away from it, Daniel, whatever you do. Don't look too close, the food isn't for us. Her tone shook, not tough like usual, and then the line cut, dead static. I shoved the radio back on my belt, forced myself to finish the round, but my nerves frayed with every corner. The mall didn't feel empty anymore, it felt like it was breathing. By 3 a.m., I ducked into the security office again, heart pounding. I turned on one of the working monitors hooked to an old camera feed. Static filled the screen, then cleared. Showing the main concourse, my blood went cold, because standing in the middle of it was me. My uniform, my mop. My exact face staring up at the camera, his lips curled into a smile I've never worn. A grin too wide, too slow. I panicked and slammed the monitor off just as his head began to tilt. The logbook nearly slipped from my hands. Rule 6 burned in my mind, don't look at yourself too long. I realized every rule wasn't just about the mall. It was about survival against something using the mall as its playground. Something that wore faces, something that wanted mine. I spent the last 2 hours of that shift sitting in the office with every light on, clutching the logbook, waiting for the clock to crawl toward 5 a.m. And when it finally hit, I bolted for the employee door, gasping when the dawn broke over the cracked parking lot. But even as I stepped into the sunlight, I knew I wasn't free. Not really, because the rules weren't guidelines. They were chains, and I had already come too close to breaking them. By the third night, I had stopped pretending the rules were just there to spook the new guy. After what I saw on the cameras, I knew something in the mall was watching me, waiting for me to slip. I came back with a flashlight and the logbook tucked into my jacket like it was a Bible. Sandra met me at the entrance smoking a cheap cigarette. She looked me over and said, "You read it yet?" I nodded. "Yeah, all 7. She flicked ash on the concrete and muttered, "Then you know enough to keep your head down." Her tone was flat, but her eyes gave her away. She was scared, maybe more than me. We split up as usual. Her route was the outer halls and service corridors. Mine was the concourse, food court, and maintenance. Around 1 a.m., I was in the west wing near the old arcade when I heard it. My name, clear as day. Daniel. The voice echoed down the corridor. Not through the PA, not through static, but a real voice bouncing off tile and glass. My skin crawled, I spun around, shining the flashlight into the shadows. Nothing moved. The shops were dark. Metal grates pulled down. I told myself it had to be Sandra, but the voice came again. Softer this time. "Daniel, it's me." And my blood froze, because it wasn't Sandra's voice. It was my brother's, Adam. He'd been dead 6 years, buried in a cemetery 3 towns over. I knew his voice better than anyone, the drawl and the vowels. The little catch when he said my name. I whispered no, but my legs moved anyway. carrying me toward the service stairs that led down to the basement level. The air grew colder with each step. The light overhead flickered. I clutched the railing and the logbook slipped halfway out of my jacket. Rule 5 stared up at me. If you hear someone calling your name from the basement, do not answer. I stopped halfway down. My brother's voice floated up again, closer, like he was right at the bottom. Danny, help me, please. The way he said it made my stomach twist. Adam had called me Danny when we were kids, nobody else did. I gritted my teeth, my hand shaking on the railing. Every instinct screamed to run, but my chest ached with grief, with memory. I almost shouted back before Sandra's voice crackled over the radio. Daniel, where are you? I fumbled the walkie to my mouth. Stairs to the basement, I think, Adam. I cut myself off. Realizing how insane that sounded, Sandra's reply was sharp. Get out of there now, that's not him. Don't you remember Rule 5? The radio hissed, then cut, dead silence. And in that silence, Adam's voice whispered right into my ear as if someone stood beside me. If you leave me again, I'll never forgive you. I bolted up the stairs 2 steps at a time. The sound of footsteps chased me, heavy, too many legs scraping the concrete. I didn't stop until I reached the concourse. Bent over, lungs burning, I glanced back and the basement door was shut. Padlocked from the outside, the lock hadn't been there when I went in. My hands trembled as I shoved the logbook back inside my jacket. I needed air. I stumbled toward the food court and found Sandra standing near the darkened Burger King, her radio dangling from her belt. She gave me a hard look. You went down there, didn't you? I swallowed hard. Just a few steps. She shook her head. That's all it takes. You hear the voice and it knows you. It'll keep trying now. Her words made my stomach knot. What the hell is in this place? She sighed, rubbed her temples. Doesn't matter what it is. What matters is we don't give it what it wants. I wanted to press, but the PA system popped overhead. Static crackling. Then the same cheerful pre-recorded line from the mall's heyday. Attention shoppers, we'll be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your final purchases. The speakers buzzed. My eyes instinctively darted up and I caught Sandra's hand slapping my chest, forcing my head down. Don't look, she hissed. My breath came fast. I kept my gaze on the filthy floor tiles. The announcement played on a loop. Cheerful and wrong until it clicked off, silence crashing down. I realized how close I'd come to breaking Rule 2 and my knees felt weak. Sandra let go of me, muttering, 2 near misses in one night. You're not gonna last here if you keep that up. I wanted to argue, but couldn't. The rules weren't suggestions, they were survival, and I'd almost handed myself over twice in less than an hour. I decided then I had to be perfect, no more slips. But as I walked the mall alone again, I felt eyes on me from every dark storefront, mannequins leaning closer, shadows shifting, and always, just faint enough to make me doubt. My brother's voice calling from somewhere below, patient, waiting for me to break. The night after the basement incident, I swore to myself I wouldn't let the rules slip again. I carried the logbook like it was welded to my hand. Every page burned into my brain, and even Sandra looked at me differently. Less like I was some rookie and more like someone who'd already been tested and barely crawled out. We didn't talk much before shifts, just a nod at the entrance. Then she disappeared down her halls while I pushed the mop bucket toward the concourse. The mall smelled worse that night, like old tinsel and mildew mixed with burnt plastic. It was close to 2 in the morning when I passed the north wing where the seasonal shops used to be. That's when I saw it, a faint glow seeping out from the doorway of Santa's workshop. A pop-up store that hadn't been opened since the late 90s. The sign above was cracked, letters peeling, but the inside pulsed with soft red and green light. Rule 4 stabbed into my skull. If the Santa's workshop store lights up, shut your eyes until it's dark again. My throat went dry. I squeezed the mop handle and whispered, not looking, not looking. I clenched my eyes shut so hard I saw stars, but the light was strong even through my lids. It flickered against my skin, pulsing brighter then dimmer like it was testing me. The air filled with the faint jingle of bells, slow and wrong, dragging out each chime until it hurt my ears. Then a voice deep and booming like an old mall Santa. Ho, 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 come on in, Daniel. My stomach lurched. I hadn't given my name, but the voice knew it anyway. I bit down on my tongue hard enough to taste blood just to stop myself from answering. The bells grew louder. The smell of peppermint twisted with rot pushed against me, and something heavy shuffled closer. I heard the scrape of boots on tile, the creak of a chair shifting inside the shop, then whispers, dozens of them, children's voices chanting, Don't peek, don't peek, don't peek, the sound made my hair stand on end. I dug my nails into my palms, praying the light would go out. Then the jingle stopped. Silence pressed against me, and finally the glow dimmed, fading until the corridor was dark again. I opened my eyes, gasping. The storefront was black, empty, like it had never been touched. But the faint imprint of boot tracks trailed across the dust in front of the door, too big, too deep, leading toward me before vanishing. I stumbled back, almost falling over my mop bucket, when Sandra's voice snapped through the radio. "You froze, didn't you?" I stammered. "No." I kept my eyes shut. She paused, then said, "Good, then you'll live, but listen. Don't linger near that shop. It doesn't like when you pass its test." Her words sank like ice into my chest. I wheeled the bucket as fast as I could toward the food court, but the rest of the night the jingling stayed in my ears, faint like it had burrowed into my skull. By 4 a.m. I ducked into the security office to breathe. The monitors flickered on their own, static spitting across the screens. One showed the Santa's workshop glowing again. Only this time there was movement inside, blurred shapes circling a throne in the middle of the store. Tall and short figures, their faces covered in static fuzz. I slammed the power button off, panting, clutching the logbook tighter than ever. It took everything I had not to run straight out the employee doors. But Rule 7 was carved into me now. Never leave the mall before 5 a.m., no matter what happened, so I sat there shaking, staring at the clock until the red digits finally rolled to 5-0. The moment the alarm went off, I ran out into the parking lot, gasping like I'd been drowning, the sky just starting to pale. And for the first time, I wondered not if I could survive another night, but how many more times the mall could test me before I failed one of its rules and joined whatever was waiting in that glowing shop. By the 5th night, I had learned enough to know that the rules weren't just suggestions written down by paranoid janitors. They were the only thread keeping me alive. But that night, I also learned what happened when someone broke one. It started normal. As normal as an abandoned mall crawling with things that wore faces could be. I came in with the logbook tucked under my jacket, and Sandra already waiting, her cigarette glowing in the dark. She didn't even say hello, just muttered, "Keep your head low tonight." "There's someone new." Her words made me frown. I asked, "New like another worker?" She nodded toward the shadows, and sure enough, leaning against the wall was a skinny man with dark circles under his eyes and a stained janitor's shirt. He looked twitchy, like a stray dog ready to bolt. Sandra said his name was Carl. He'd been hired for the East Wing. Apparently Kessler was desperate for extra help. Though from the way Carl's hands shook, I wondered if he was more liability than support. I offered him a nod. He barely met my eyes, muttering, "It's just a mall, man. Don't see why everyone's so jumpy." The way he said it made my stomach clench. Because that kind of attitude gets you killed in a place like this. Sandra pulled me aside, whispering, "He hasn't read the logbook. Kessler didn't give it to him yet. Guess he wants to see if Carl can handle it raw." Her voice was bitter. "That's not fair," I hissed, but she shook her head. "Fair doesn't matter here. Survival does." I went about my shift tense as hell, ears straining for any sound. And around 1 a.m. I heard it, not the basement voice. Not jingling bells, but something worse. A scream high and ragged echoing from the East Wing. I grabbed the mop handle like a weapon and ran. The echo bouncing off the empty storefronts. When I rounded the corner, I saw Carl, standing in the middle of the hall under a PA speaker. His head tilted back, mouth wide, eyes rolled, his body trembling as if invisible hands gripped him. The speaker above hissed static and played the same cheerful line as before. "Attention shoppers, please make your final purchases." But this time the voice distorted, warping into something deeper, slower. Carl was staring directly at it, breaking Rule 2 in the worst way. I shouted his name, but he didn't respond. His lips moved like he was whispering back to the voice. Then blood trickled from his ears, his nose, his eyes. He collapsed to his knees, still staring up. The light flickered violently. I didn't know what to do. The logbook's rule screamed in my head, so I yanked my jacket over my head, shielding my face, and crawled toward him blind. I grabbed his arm and tried to drag him away, but his body was stiff, locked. The moment the announcement cut off and the static died, Carl fell limp, his eyes wide open but glassy, his chest rising shallow. I shook him, shouted, but his lips just kept moving silently, repeating words I couldn't hear. Sandra appeared a moment later, swearing under her breath. She knelt, checked his pulse, then pulled me back. "He's not dead, but he's not coming back either, not really." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She looked me dead in the eye. Once they've got your attention, they don't let go. His body's here. But he'll never be Carl again. We dragged him to the security office, laid him on a cot, his eyes staring at the ceiling, his lips whispering, always whispering. I wanted to cry, rage, something, but fear choked me. Sandra lit another cigarette, her hands shaking. "This is why the rules matter," she said flatly. "You slip once, that's it. You're theirs." I stared at Carl's body until the shift ended. 5 a.m. crawling closer like molasses. Every minute his lips moved, repeating some phrase I couldn't quite catch. Once I leaned closer and swore I heard my name slip out between the whispers. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the logbook, and refused to look again. When the sun rose, Sandra and I carried him out to the loading dock. Kessler was waiting, his face grim. He didn't ask what happened, just lit a cigarette and muttered, "Another one lost," then waved 2 men forward. They loaded Carl into a van like cargo. No questions, no ceremony, I demanded. "Where are they taking him?" Kessler's eyes bored into me, cold and sharp. "Don't ask if you want to keep breathing." Then he walked off, leaving me shaking with anger and dread. That was the night I realized the mall didn't just eat people. It used them, twisted them, left them shells whispering secrets no one should hear. And that was the night I swore I wouldn't end up like Carl, staring at the ceiling, repeating the mall's words until nothing human was left in me. After Carl was taken away in that unmarked van, I couldn't shake the image of him lying on the cot with his lips still moving, whispering words only the mall could hear. It followed me into sleep, into every waking thought. I kept replaying his face, not because I cared that much about him. He'd only worked one shift, but because I saw myself in him, and that terrified me. The next night, when I clocked in, the atmosphere was different, heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. Sandra didn't crack jokes, didn't smoke right away. She just looked at me and said, "Tonight, keep your eyes off the cameras no matter what. Understand?" I nodded, remembering the line from the logbook. Rule 6. Do not trust reflections, cameras, or mirrors. If you see yourself moving differently, leave immediately. Up until then, I thought it was more paranoia, after all. Who hasn't stared into a camera feed too long and thought they saw something weird? But tonight was different. The mall wanted me to test it. Around midnight, the east wing felt colder. The fluorescents buzzed like hornets, and every monitor in the security office flickered in sync. Sandra was busy in the maintenance closet, so I was alone when it happened. I was mopping near the food court, humming low just to keep my nerves down, when the overhead TV screens, still connected to the old camera system, sputtered and one came alive, showing a grainy black and white feed of the food court. I froze because it was me on the screen, standing exactly where I was, mop in hand. But the figure wasn't moving right. The angle of his shoulders was wrong, like he was leaning toward the camera, though I was standing upright. I tested it by lifting my mop slowly. My reflection didn't move. Instead, it cocked its head, its lips curling into the faintest smirk. My knees went weak. I turned away fast, remembering the rule, but curiosity clawed at me. I wanted to know what it would do next. I couldn't help glancing back. Now it was waving, slow, deliberate, like it wanted me to come closer. My stomach dropped. The logbook had warned, "If it notices you, you've already lost seconds." I sprinted from the food court, refusing to look at any of the other monitors. But as I passed a dark storefront with glass windows, I saw it again. My reflection inside the empty clothing shop, except this time it wasn't waving. It was mouthing words over and over, the glass too foggy to catch them. I hurried faster, heart pounding, and slammed into Sandra near the janitor's closet. She grabbed me hard by the shoulders. "You looked," she accused. I stammered, "just a glance." "I swear." Her eyes narrowed, then softened. "You're still here? So you pulled away fast enough, but next time, don't give it even that." She shoved a flashlight into my hand. "Keep moving, keep your focus. Don't linger near reflective surfaces." We patrolled together for the next hour. Her presence steadied me, but around 2:30 the power cut again, plunging the hall into black except for our weak beams. Sandra cursed, fumbling with her radio. Janitor should have kicked on. Then her light swung across the empty storefronts and stopped. Her breath hitched. "Don't look," she whispered. But I couldn't help it. The glass of an old arcade cabinet caught my beam, and there it was, my double, pressed right against the inside of the screen. Eyes wide and unblinking, lips moving fast now, syllables tumbling out too quick for me to follow. I dropped the flashlight in panic, the beam spinning wildly. The reflection crawled closer against the glass, though I hadn't moved. Sandra yanked me backward. nearly dislocating my shoulder. "Run!" she barked. We sprinted through the halls, the sound of footsteps doubling ours, echoing from somewhere too close. My lungs burned. We skidded around the corner and barreled into the maintenance stairwell. Slamming the door shut behind us, her hands trembled as she locked it with a chain. "That wasn't just a reflection," she muttered. "That was a breach." Sweat poured down my spine, I demanded. "What the hell does that mean?" She pulled her cigarette pack out with shaking fingers. Lit one, inhaled deep. "It means the mall tried to swap you. It wants a piece of you walking in here, and once that happens, you're just a shell like Carl." My stomach flipped. I leaned against the wall, staring at the floor. She added, "Every janitor here has had their moment with the mirrors. Most don't survive it, that's why the rule exists. It's the hardest to follow because curiosity always wins." She took another drag, exhaled smoke. "The first guy I worked with lasted 2 weeks. Then the cameras caught him smiling back at himself. By morning, his body was found in the stairwell. Empty eyes, lips whispering just like Carl." Her voice cracked for the first time since I'd met her. Not much, but enough. And I realized she'd seen more partners go than she let on. We sat there until the generator finally kicked in, humming alive, the lights flickering back on through the narrow window in the stairwell door. When we emerged, the monitors in the security office were all black, like nothing had happened, but on the desk was something that hadn't been there before. A Polaroid face down. Sandra picked it up, cursed, and shoved it in her pocket. "Forget you saw that," she said sharply. I demanded again. "What is going on here? Why do they keep trying to get us?" she snapped. "Because we're still human." Then stormed off down the hall. I stood alone, ears ringing, my reflection in the black screen of a dead monitor staring back at me. Only this time, thank God, it matched my every move. I thought I'd gotten used to the mall by then. The flickering lights, the whispers in the vents. Even the rules had started to feel like second nature, like muscle memory. But that night reminded me how quickly this place could break any illusion of control, because the theater in the West Wing came alive, and it's not even supposed to have power, let alone movies running. The West Wing had always been the dead zone. The logbook listed it plain and simple. Rule 7. Never enter the theater after midnight. If you hear a movie playing, ignore it. The first time I read that, I thought it sounded almost funny, like something you'd tell a kid to keep them from sneaking around. But after what I'd seen with Carl and the reflections, nothing seemed funny anymore. The night started quiet, eerily so. Even Sandra seemed on edge, smoking faster than usual, her eyes darting to the dark hallway that led west. I finally asked her, "What's down there?" "Really?" She gave me a look that could have cut glass. "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." But about an hour later, around 1 a.m., the sound drifted through the halls, faint at first, then clearer. The muffled static of old speakers, the scratchy roll of a film reel, and then voices. Dialogue from a movie I couldn't place. Cheerful, like something from the 80s. Sandra stiffened, dropped her cigarette, crushed it out with her boot. "Don't listen," she hissed. But the sound was everywhere, leaking through the walls. Impossible to shut out. My curiosity gnawed at me. I kept glancing toward the hallway, and then I noticed something worse. Shadows moving against the far wall, flickering like the light from a projector, except the projector room in that wing had been stripped years ago. I felt the hair rise on my arms. Sandra caught me staring and gripped my wrist hard. "Don't," she warned. "If you look too long, it'll pull you in." I wanted to believe her. I really did, but when you're told don't look, the first thing your brain screams is look. I lasted maybe 10 minutes before I broke. I told Sandra I was going to check the mop bucket in the storage closet. She glared but let me go. And instead of heading to the closet, I slipped down the west hallway, the sound of the movie growing louder with each step. The scent of popcorn hit me next, stale but strong, a smell that hadn't existed in that mall for over a decade. My stomach twisted. I should have turned back right then, but I didn't. The theater doors stood wide open, their faded red paint peeling, and inside I saw it, the screen lit up, grainy images flickering. A family at a dinner table laughing, eating, though their faces were blurred like someone smeared their features with wet paint. I stepped closer, drawn like a moth. The seats creaked even though no one was in them. I swear I saw the shape of heads, silhouettes sitting upright. Perfectly still, my chest tightened. The rule screamed in my head, but my legs kept moving. And then I saw myself on the screen, sitting at that same table, smiling, laughing with those blurred people, my fork lifting, my lips moving in silent conversation. I froze, bile rising in my throat, because the me on the screen turned its head, slowly, deliberately, and looked directly out of the projection. Eyes locking onto mine, it smiled wider, too wide, and waved me closer. My heart nearly burst. I stumbled backward, tripping over a seat. The screen figure stood up, stepping away from the fake family. Its movements jerky, like a puppet tugged on strings. It pressed its hands against the inside of the screen as if the film was just glass. Trying to push through, I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the exit. The sound of laughter chasing me down the hall. High-pitched mechanical wrong. Sandra was waiting, furious. She slapped me across the face the moment I emerged. "Do you want to die like Carl?" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage and fear. I couldn't even answer, too busy gasping for breath. She dragged me back to the janitor's office and slammed the door. "You never go into the theater. If you hear it again, you cover your ears and keep walking. You don't even let yourself wonder what's playing," I stammered. It showed me sitting with a family, people I don't know." Sandra paled, sat down heavily. "That's how it gets you. It shows you something you want or something you fear. Either way, it hooks in. Once it hooks in, you'll follow it willingly." She buried her face in her hands for a second, whispering, "You're lucky you ran." Her words stuck with me. But what stuck more was the image burned into my brain. That fake version of me waving, smiling, trying to step out of the film. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What would have happened if I'd let it? If it had managed to cross? Sandra caught me staring off later and muttered, "It's not over once you've seen it. It doesn't let go easy," and she was right. Because that night when I finally left the mall, I glanced at the dark glass of the front doors, and for a split second, I saw the flicker of projector light behind my own reflection, like the movie was still playing, waiting for me to come back. By the time the next shift rolled around, I wasn't just scared. I was angry. Angry that nobody told me the truth about the theater. Angry that Carl had been thrown to the wolves like bait. Angry that every night I walked into that mall with only scraps of information, while Kessler acted like some gatekeeper to knowledge I needed to survive. Sandra saw it too. The way I slammed the mop bucket harder than usual. The way I snapped at every sound. She didn't say anything at first. Just smoked and let me burn off the energy. But eventually she muttered, "You're not the first to start hating him." I asked what she meant, and she blew smoke at the ceiling. "Kessler knows more than he tells, he always has. Every one of us learned the rules the hard way, but him? He wrote half of them. That stopped me cold. I'd assumed the rules had been passed down from janitors before us, scribbled in the logbook through decades of trial and error. But if Kessler had written them, that meant he'd seen it all firsthand, maybe more. When he came in around 2 a.m. to check the east corridor, I cornered him. "How long have you worked here?" I demanded. His eyes narrowed, tired but sharp. "Long enough," he said flatly. "And how many people have you watched die before handing the job to someone new?" I snapped. Sandra hissed at me to shut up, but I didn't. Kessler just stared for a long time, then said quietly, "Too many." The weight in his voice made my anger falter for half a second, but then I pressed. "You knew about Carl. You knew he didn't have the logbook and you let him walk blind." Kessler's jaw tightened. "Carl wasn't meant to last, he was a test. Sometimes the mall demands blood before it lets the rest of us continue." I nearly lunged at him. Sandra had to step between us, her hand firm on my chest. "That's not your choice to make," I barked. Kessler finally snapped, his voice low but fierce. "It's not about choice, it's about balance. If no one feeds it, we all die. You think I like this? You think I don't wake up every morning with ghosts crawling in my skull?" The silence after was suffocating. Sandra muttered, "He's right about one thing. The mall doesn't just let us clean up and leave. It takes something in return." I shook my head, not ready to swallow that, but I couldn't deny the truth in their eyes. Later that night, when I walked past the security office, I saw Kessler sitting alone, staring at a folder of Polaroids, dozens of them spread across the desk, each one showing a janitor, some faces blurred like the family in the theater, others crystal clear, all of them gone. I froze at the doorway, my eyes drawn to one in particular, a young man about my age, same mop in hand, same tired eyes, his lips just barely curled in a smile that didn't reach his face. Kessler noticed me and slammed the folder shut. "Out," he growled. I obeyed, but that image seared into me. Proof that this wasn't just about rules. This was about history, a cycle repeating, feeding something we didn't understand. Later, Sandra caught me brooding near the food court. "You saw the photos, didn't you?" I nodded. She sighed. "They're all the ones who didn't make it. Or maybe the ones who did but never really left." Her words didn't help. They just added fuel to the fire. That night, the mall seemed more alive than usual. Vents rattling, shadows stretching longer than they should, and every reflective surface I passed showed a flicker of projector light, as if the theater hadn't let me go. I clenched the mop handle so hard my knuckles ached. When the clock hit 4, Sandra finally pulled me aside. "You need to hear this, but if I tell you..." "You can't repeat it to anyone, especially Kessler," I promised. Though my voice cracked, she leaned in close, her whisper trembling. "The mall isn't haunted. Not like people think, it's a prison. The rules don't just protect us, they keep something in. Something that's been here longer than this building. Longer than the city." I felt my chest tighten. "How do you know?" She shook her head. "Because I saw it once. Years ago, and it nearly broke me, all these rules. They're not random, they're chains, and every time one of us slips, every time someone like Carl gets taken, the chains loosen." I stared at her, disbelief mixing with dread. "Then why stay?" Her laugh was hollow. "Because once you're chosen, you don't get to leave, not really. You walk out, but it follows you, whispers in your shower, shows up in your mirror until you crawl back here begging for the structure, for the rules, because out there are none." My skin prickled with goosebumps, and suddenly the logbook felt less like a guide and more like a set of shackles. I didn't sleep the next day, couldn't. Every sound outside my apartment made me think of Carl's whispers. Every glance in the mirror felt like I'd catch my other self waving. And worst of all, I kept replaying Kessler's words. Sometimes the mall demands blood. If that was true, then it wasn't just about survival. It was about sacrifice. And the terrifying part was I didn't know how long before it demanded mine. The night after Sandra told me the mall wasn't just haunted, but a prison, I couldn't focus on anything else. Every creak in the ceiling felt heavier. Every flicker of the lights looked like a warning. And when Kessler showed up halfway through the shift, his face pale, jaw clenched, I knew something was wrong before he even spoke. He gathered us in the security office, the three of us hunched under buzzing fluorescents, and said flatly, "We've had a breach." My stomach dropped. Sandra muttered a curse under her breath. "Which rule?" Kessler's lips tightened. "Rule 3, the basement rule. Never answer the voice, never acknowledge it." I felt my blood run cold. "Who?" I asked. Kessler didn't answer right away, just lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. Sandra slammed her fist against the desk. "Who?" Finally he muttered. "Hector, new temp from maintenance." I didn't even know the guy. But that didn't matter. I already pictured what must have happened. The basement door whispering, his curiosity winning, his voice answering back, and then the lock snapping. Kessler ordered us to patrol in pairs and listen for changes, which only made my skin crawl more. Sandra paired with me, and from the way she chain-smoked, I could tell she was just as scared as I was. The mall didn't feel normal that night, not even by its twisted standards. The air was too thick, the smell of mildew sharper, the vents rattled nonstop. And then we heard it, a low groaning sound, not mechanical, deeper, like the earth itself straining. Coming from the direction of the basement, I wanted to turn back, but Sandra pressed on, her flashlight beam shaking across the tiles. When we reached the stairwell, the temperature dropped. Our breath fogged. The basement door was cracked open, something that had never happened before, and faint whispers slithered out. Dozens of voices overlapping. Some male, some female, some sounding like children, some like animals. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just outside. It was inside my skull, crawling through my thoughts. Sandra grabbed my arm and hissed, "Don't speak, don't answer," and pulled me back. But before we could retreat, the lights above us exploded, showering sparks, and the building shook. Like something heavy yanked against chains deep underground, I stumbled, almost fell down the stairs, catching a glimpse of movement in the dark below. Not one figure, but many, shapes writhing together like shadows made flesh. I tore my eyes away, gasping. Sandra dragged me back up the hall, slamming the stairwell door shut. But even through the thick metal, we heard the pounding, rhythmic as if fists or claws hammered at it in unison. Then came a laugh, high-pitched, childlike, echoing through the halls where no children had walked in years. We bolted back to the office, Kessler already there, staring at the monitors with wide eyes, every camera feed flickering, every corridor shaking in grainy black and white. "The chains are loosening," he muttered, more to himself than us, I demanded. "What the hell is chained down there?" He didn't answer. Sandra grabbed him by the collar, shouting, "Tell him, damn it! He deserves to know." Kessler's hands trembled, ashes spilling from his cigarette. Finally, he said, "It doesn't have a name. Not one we can say. It's not a ghost. It's not a demon. It's hunger. Pure hunger. And the rules are the locks. Every time one breaks, the locks weaken." His words landed like ice water in my veins. I thought of Carl, of the theater, of the reflection smiling at me. All of them just pieces of the same system, keeping something worse at bay. The pounding grew louder, shaking the desk. Monitors falling to the floor, one shattering at our feet. Through the static on the screens, I saw things moving in the halls. Not quite human. Shadows that stretched too long, bending at wrong angles, walking but not on feet, crawling but upright. My chest seized with panic. "What do we do?" I begged. Kessler finally snapped back to life, barking. "We reinforce the locks, that's all we can do. Keep moving. Follow the rules. Make the rounds. Remind it we're still here." I wanted to scream that it made no sense, but Sandra dragged me up, shoving a flashlight into my hands. "He's right. If it thinks it can slip free, it will. We have to remind it we're watching," so we split again. Me and Sandra heading for the west wing while Kessler stalked the east. Every step echoed too loud, like the mall was bigger than it had ever been, like the walls had stretched. The whispers grew louder too, calling us by name now. My name, her name, begging, coaxing, promising things I didn't want to hear. Family, peace, escape. My dead brother's voice even slipped in, whispering my childhood nickname. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood just to keep from answering. The projector in the theater flickered again, light spilling into the hallway even though the doors were shut. I forced myself not to look, Sandra gripping my sleeve to keep me straight. Suddenly a crash echoed from the east side. Kessler's voice screaming something before cutting off. Static swallowing the radios, Sandra and I sprinted, hearts pounding, rounding the corner to find the east corridor in chaos. Lights dangling from the ceiling, tiles ripped up as if claws had gouged them, and in the center, the basement door at the far end wide open, cold air rushing out like a living thing. Kessler stood halfway down the hall, his face pale. His cigarette burned down to the filter. "It's out," he whispered. And then the shadows surged forward, rushing up the walls across the ceiling, dozens of hands reaching. Shapes slipping like oil, Sandra yanked me back, shouting for him to run, but Kessler just stood there. And for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Not the hardened mask of the man who'd seen everything, but raw terror. "Close it," he screamed. "Close it now." Sandra dragged me toward the heavy security gate at the corridor's entrance. We slammed it down just as the shadows reached us, fingers slipping through the bars before snapping back. The gate shuddered under the weight of whatever was pressing against it. Then silence. Complete silence. Kessler was gone, swallowed by the dark. I wanted to lift the gate, to look for him. But Sandra's grip was iron, her face streaked with sweat and tears. "He chose," she rasped. That was his price. We stood there shaking until the pounding stopped, and slowly, agonizingly, the whispers faded. The lights flickered back to life, the air warmed, the mall settling like nothing had happened. But something had, the chains had loosened, one more lock broken, and now I couldn't shake the thought that it was only a matter of time before all of them snapped. After Kessler was taken, the mall felt different, heavier somehow, like the air itself carried more weight. Sandra and I didn't talk much the rest of that shift. There was nothing to say. He had been the one with answers, the one who always knew when to stay put and when to move, and now it was just us. Two exhausted janitors clutching flashlights and waiting for the building to decide what it wanted next. When dawn finally came, we left in silence. But I noticed something before I walked out. The logbook was missing. The desk in the office bare except for a single cigarette butt still smoking faintly in the ashtray. I thought Kessler had taken it with him, but when I got home and peeled off my jacket, there it was, stuffed into the inside pocket, like someone had slipped it in while I wasn't looking. I froze, staring at the battered leather cover. The edges curled and stained. I had never taken it out of the mall before. It wasn't supposed to leave, but now it was in my apartment, sitting heavy on my lap like a curse. I almost threw it out the window, but curiosity won. Late that morning, I opened it and began to read, flipping past the rules I already knew, the ones etched into my brain by fear, and that's when I saw it, tucked in the back, written in smaller handwriting. Not the neat, blocky scrawl I recognized as Kessler's, but something older, jagged, frantic. It wasn't numbered like the others, just labeled in red ink, the hidden rule. My throat went dry as I read the words. If all chains weaken, If the doors open and the hunger steps free, there is one choice left. You must feed it willingly. Choose the sacrifice, for if it chooses, none will remain. My hands trembled so hard the book nearly fell. I slammed it shut, heart racing, the idea clawed at my mind. Not just surviving shift to shift, but the possibility that one day I'd have to make that choice. Pick who gets devoured so the rest of the world doesn't. When I showed Sandra that night, she went pale, her cigarette dropping from her lips. "He never told us this," she whispered. I nodded. Maybe he didn't want us to know. Maybe he wanted us desperate enough to follow the rules without asking what happens if they fail. She shook her head, pacing. Or maybe he was waiting for the day he'd have to make that call. Maybe that's why he stayed so long. The idea made me sick. Kessler sitting in that office year after year, watching janitors die, holding this hidden rule like a knife he might have to use. Sandra grabbed the book and shoved it back into my hands. "Don't ever bring this outside again, you hear me? It doesn't belong out there." Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with something harder than fear, anger maybe, or resignation. That night the mall was worse, shadows stretching longer, whispers louder, as if the prisoner below knew one of its chains had been broken. The basement door groaned even though it was locked, and every reflective surface showed flickers of movement just beyond sight. I felt the weight of the hidden rule pressing against me, every sound reminding me that if it all went wrong, I'd have to choose. Around 3 a.m., Sandra and I checked the West Wing together. The theater's silent now, no projector light, but the smell of popcorn lingered, sour and stale. We moved quickly, not lingering, and when we came back toward the food court, we found something waiting on the floor. Another Polaroid, just like the ones I'd seen on Kessler's desk. Only this time it wasn't of some long-gone janitor. It was of me, standing in the hallway with my mop, except behind me in the photo was a shadow with too many hands, gripping my shoulders like it belonged there. I dropped it, swore. Sandra picked it up and studied it, her mouth pressed thin. "It's marking you," she said quietly. "The mall's already decided who it wants." I felt my stomach lurch. "You think it's me?" She didn't answer. Just tucked the photo into her pocket like she'd keep it safe or maybe hide it from me. We finished the shift in silence, but I couldn't shake the thought, the hidden rule, the photo, the possibility that when the time came, it wouldn't be about me choosing anything. Maybe it would already have chosen. The ride home that morning was a blur, the logbook heavy in my bag, the city outside feeling unreal, like I was just a ghost walking through borrowed time. I locked the book in a drawer, tried to sleep, but dreams came anyway. Dreams of Kessler standing in the theater, waving at me from the screen, his eyes hollow, his lips moving silently, and behind him the blurred family at the table. Waiting, I woke drenched in sweat, heart hammering, and when I checked the drawer, the logbook was open to the hidden rule, as if the mall wanted me to read it again, to never forget what was coming. The next shift began like a funeral march, both Sandra and I moving through the dark halls with our mops and flashlights, but neither of us really paying attention to cleaning anymore. The mall wasn't a workplace, it was a cage, and we were just rats waiting for the next rattle of the bars. Every step I took, I felt the weight of the Polaroid in her pocket, the one showing me marked, and worse, the hidden rule seared into my mind. Choose the sacrifice before it chooses for you. I kept telling myself I wouldn't, I couldn't, but that night the mall didn't give us the luxury of denial. Around midnight, we heard the sound first. Not whispers, not static, but crying. Soft and high-pitched like a child lost in a supermarket. Echoing through the West Wing, Sandra froze, her face draining of color. "Don't follow it," she hissed. But the sound moved closer, bouncing off walls, tugging at my chest like hooks. I felt my feet pulling toward it like instinct. Like the mall had found a new way in. Sandra grabbed my sleeve. "It's bait, Daniel, don't you see it knows what pulls at you?" But then the crying shifted, the voice calling my name in the same tone my little brother used when he was scared. I ripped free from her grasp and sprinted down the corridor, heart hammering, flashlight beam slicing through the dark, until I saw her, a small figure sitting in the middle of the hallway, knees tucked to chest, head bowed, hair hanging in her face. She looked about 8 years old, wearing a faded pink dress, whispering my name. I froze, every part of me screaming this was wrong, but another part aching with a need to help, to save. My voice cracked. "Who are you?" She didn't answer, just lifted her head slowly, and my stomach dropped, because her face wasn't a child's at all. It was blurred, smeared like melted paint, her mouth opening wider and wider until the crying became laughter. Sharp and cruel, shadows poured from her skin, stretching across the walls. Sandra appeared behind me, screaming for me to run, and we bolted together back toward the food court. But the shadows followed, slithering like living smoke, the mall itself trembling, ceiling tiles falling, lights bursting. When we reached the food court, the shadows stopped, coiling like snakes around the dark storefronts, and then the voice came, booming, layered with dozens of tones at once, male and female, young and old. "One must feed," it said. "One must stay." Sandra and I pressed back to back. Flashlights shaking in our hands, I croaked, "What does it mean?" But I already knew. The hidden rule had come alive, demanding a sacrifice. Sandra's jaw tightened, she whispered, "It wants us to choose." The shadows writhed closer, their edges forming shapes, faces flickering in and out. Some I didn't recognize, some I did, Carl's hollow eyes, Kessler's cigarette glow, even my brother's smile, all blending together, taunting me. "Don't listen," Sandra shouted. "It's playing tricks." But the voice came again, louder, shaking the walls. "Choose, or all chains break." The ground split and a hairline cracked beneath our feet. I staggered, gripping the mop like it could protect me. Sandra locked eyes with me, fierce and steady. "Listen to me, Daniel. Don't let it decide for us. That's worse than anything." My chest seized. "You can't mean—" But she cut me off. "If one of us has to go, it'll be me," I shouted back. Panicked. "No, you've been here longer. You know more." She actually laughed, bitter and hollow. "Exactly, I've been here too long. I've seen too many die if it wants a price. It should be mine." The shadows surged at that, like they were excited by the offer. The voice chanting, "Feed, feed, feed." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I saw was her face lit by the trembling beam, sweat glistening on her forehead, cigarette smoke still clinging to her hair. And I realized I couldn't let her go, not like this. Not when she had been the only one keeping me alive. "No," I shouted. "Take me." The words left before I could stop them. The shadows froze, every flickering face turning toward me. Sandra screamed, "Daniel, no!" But the mall itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, the air pressing down on me like an ocean. And in that silence I heard something else. Faint but clear, Kessler's voice whispering in my ear. "Don't give it what it wants." I staggered, looking around, but he wasn't there. Just the echo of his warning. And it broke me out of the spell. I realized then the hidden rule wasn't instruction. It was temptation. A way to trick us into giving it a sacrifice willingly, because that was the only way the chains would break faster. Sandra must have seen the change in my face because she grabbed my hand, crushing it tight, and shouted into the darkness. "We choose no one." The voice roared in fury. The shadows surging, slamming against the walls. But we held firm, gripping each other, repeating like a mantra, "No one, no one, no one." The building shook, tiles cracking, glass shattering, the sound of chains snapping echoing deep below. But then it stopped. Just like that, silence falling heavy. The shadows retreating like smoke sucked into a vent, leaving the food court empty except for us. Trembling, drenched in sweat, Sandra collapsed onto a chair, gasping. "We bought time," she rasped. "But it's not over. It'll try again." "Harder next time," I sat beside her, my whole body shaking, the hidden rule burning in my pocket, its words twisting in my mind, and for the first time I understood the real horror. Not just the monsters in the mall, but the constant pressure to break, to give in, to let it win. And I wasn't sure how many more nights I could keep saying no. I thought we had bought time when we screamed into the shadows that we would not choose. But the mall doesn't forget, it doesn't forgive. And that night it showed us that refusing wasn't victory. It was defiance, and defiance meant punishment. Sandra and I walked into the shift like we were walking into our own graves. Exhausted, hollow-eyed, but still gripping flashlights like lifelines. The logbook heavy in my bag. That hidden rule glowing in my mind like a brand. The halls were wrong from the start. No flickering lights or sudden bangs, just silence, oppressive silence. Like the mall was holding itself back, waiting. And that was worse than any scream. Around midnight the sound came. Not whispers or laughter or crying, but chains rattling deep below, louder than ever, echoing through the air vents, vibrating the tiles under our boots. Sandra muttered, "It's close now," her face pale. Cigarette forgotten in her fingers when we reached the food court. The monitors in the security office all lit up on their own. Every screen showing us, not live but delayed, a few seconds off. Our bodies moving in staggered rhythm. I wanted to smash them all, but Sandra pulled me on. "Ignore it. Keep moving." We made it halfway down the east corridor before the floor shook, cracks spiderwebbing across the tiles, dust raining from the ceiling, and then the basement door blew open with a sound like thunder. Shadows erupted. Not smoke this time, but something thicker, with weight, claws dragging across the ground, dozens of eyes opening in the dark, all focused on us, the hunger itself rising. The air pressed down so hard I could barely breathe. Sandra screamed for me to run, but I couldn't move. Paralyzed by the sight, the rules didn't matter anymore. They'd all been broken one by one, and now the thing below wasn't bound by them. I clutched the logbook, desperate, flipping through pages even as the wind roared and shadows surged closer. And that's when I saw it scribbled on the inside back cover, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Maybe older than Kessler's, maybe older than the mall itself. 4 words, the last rule, tell, my breath caught. The meaning hit me like a hammer. All this time the logbook wasn't just instructions. It was warnings written down and passed forward. Stories told to keep the next person alive. The mall thrived in secrecy, in silence, in confusion. But if you broke that silence, if you told, you weakened its grip. Sandra grabbed my arm, shouting over the roar, "Daniel, what do we do?" I shoved the book into her hands, screaming back, "We tell them, we tell everyone." "That's the only way." The hunger's voices rose, hundreds at once, mocking, begging, demanding. "Feed, feed, feed." Shadows lunged, but I forced my legs to move, dragging Sandra toward the exit. Every step a battle, claws swiping just inches from my back. The air filled with the stench of rot, of whetstone, of something ancient and starving. We burst into the atrium, glass ceiling above us shattering as if the sky itself rejected what was inside. Shards raining down but never touching us. Sandra stumbled, but I pulled her on, screaming my story into the empty air. There are rules. There are things in here that wear your face. There are voices that call your name. There is something chained under this mall, and it is hungry. The shadows recoiled. Hissing, the chains rattling harder. Sandra caught on, adding her voice, shouting everything she'd seen in all her years. Every name of the dead, every rule broken. The wall shook. The hunger screamed in fury. Not because it was free, but because it was losing. The mall thriving on silence and secrets, and now we were ripping that away. We staggered out through the front doors, collapsing onto the cracked parking lot. Dawn breaking faintly in the east, and for a moment the mall was silent behind us. No whispers, no rattles, just dead air. I knew it wasn't gone, couldn't be. But we'd bought something better than time. We'd bought a chance. And that's why I'm telling you this now. Because the last rule wasn't about us, it was about you. About everyone who hears, if you know. If you keep the story alive, it can't take you as easily. It can't trick you into silence, so if you've listened this far, remember the rules. Don't answer the voices. Don't look at your reflection too long. Don't enter the theater. And if the hunger ever whispers your name, don't you dare give it what it wants. Tell someone instead, pass it forward. Keep the chains tight, keep the hunger bound. And whatever you do, don't ignore this, because one day you might find yourself in a mall after midnight. And if you do, these rules are the only reason you'll make it out alive. Now, if you want to keep hearing the truth, if you want to help us keep the story alive, don't let this be the last time. Subscribe, share this, tell it again in your own words, because silence is its weapon, and our voices are the only lock left.